Indonesia is building a $30 billion capital city.
Dia menjelaskan kegiatan perencanaan dan pembangunan kawasan di IKN.
Ibu kota Nusantara terus harus dijaga keberlanjutannya.
But as of 2025, only around 10,000 people live there. Just 0.8% of its 1.2 million target. This is IKN, Ibu Kota Nusantara, a planned forest city in East Kalimantan. The project is meant to address major issues in Jakarta, where over 10 million people live and part of the city are sinking by up to 10 centimeters per year. It also aims to reduce inequality since much of Indonesia's population and economy is concentrated in Java. But development also involves choices about power and priorities. IKN is a state-led relocation backed by billions in infrastructure. Yet progress has been uneven, with few civil servants actually moving, leading some to call it a ghost city.
IKN ini sekarang menjadi sangat buruk sekali.
Local communities report impacts on access to natural resources. These raise the key questions. Does development benefit everyone equally, or does it create new inequalities?
To understand what's happening in IKN, we need to look at who's actually involved. The Indonesian government is the main player here. They're the one making decisions about policy, land use, and funding. Meanwhile, private investors and construction companies are also key since the project depends heavily on their financial support. Then there are local communities and indigenous groups like Suku Bali who are directly affected, especially by land clearing and environmental changes. Worker and civil servants are part of this too, since many are expected to move and live in the new capital. And the media shapes how IKN is perceived, both nationally and globally. When you lay all of this out, it's clear that not everyone experiences IKN in the same way.
For the government, IKN brings a political legitimacy and a chance to present Indonesia as modern and forward-looking. Investors also benefit, gaining access to large infrastructure projects and long-term economic opportunities. For local communities too, the situation is very different. Some residents report reduced access to clean water, and farming has become more difficult because of environmental changes caused by construction. Indigenous groups face even greater challenges, including land displacement, environmental damage, and the erosion of their cultural identity. The differences in power make this even more obvious. The government holds the most influence through decision-making and control over resources. Investors also have significant power because the project relies on their funding. Local and indigenous communities, on the other hand, have much less influence, even though they are the most directly affected. Because of that, the benefits and costs of development aren't shared equally. Political elites and corporations gain more opportunities and influence, while local and indigenous communities face environmental damage, displacement, and loss of livelihoods. Overall, this reflects a top-down model of development, where decisions are made by powerful actors rather than the communities most affected.
IKN feels bigger than just a new capital. It opens up questions about power, inequality, and how development actually happens in Indonesia. More than $30 billion has gone into it, yet the population is still far below the target. That gap already shows how uncertain this project is. A lot of the direction comes from government decisions and investor interests. The people shaping it are pretty concentrated, and that shows in the result. The outcomes aren't equal. Elites and corporations gain more access and influence, while local and indigenous communities deal with environmental damage, displacement, and also being pushed aside. It makes you think about how development is judged. Economic growth and infrastructure alone don't tell the whole story. What matters is how the benefits are actually shared. And then, there's the bigger question. Who gets to define what progress even means? Whose voices are part of that? Whose conversation aren't part of that? If the people most affected aren't included, then the results start to reflect that. So, in the end, The real question is who IKN ends up serving.
I think the idea behind IKN makes sense in some ways. Jakarta already faces lots of problems like overcrowding and flooding, so moving the capital could reduce some of that pressure. It could also create new economic opportunities outside of Java, which has been the center of development for a long time. But at the same time, I don't think the benefits are experienced equally. A lot of the decisions seem to come from the government and large investors, while local communities have less influence, even though they are directly affected by the construction and environmental changes. I also think that there is a difference between development on paper and in everyday life. Big infrastructure projects can look successful from the outside, but that doesn't automatically mean people's quality of life improves equally. So for me, the issue isn't whether development should happen, because development is important actually. The bigger question is who gets included in the process and who ends up carrying most of the consequences.
But when you look closer, the impact doesn't seem balanced. Groups with more power, like political elites, corporations, and investors, have a bigger role in shaping the project, and also gain more opportunities from it. Meanwhile, communities living near the area have to deal with the immediate effects, like environmental changes or uncertainty around land and their livelihoods. And because they have less influence over decision making, it can feel like development is happening around them rather than with them. So I think it kind of reflects a broader issue about how development is carried out. Economic growth may happen, but that doesn't necessarily mean that outcomes are equally shared.
The second response shifts more toward power and inequality. It highlights how political elites, corporations, and investors have a stronger role in shaping the project, while local communities deal more directly with environmental and social impacts. This reflects a power imbalance where influence over decision-making is concentrated among groups with greater economic and political power.
Together, these interviews reinforce the idea that development is not only about building infrastructure or generating economic growth. It also involves questions about who makes decisions and who ultimately benefits the most and whose experiences are prioritized.
The two interviews shows the opinions on IKN are not completely divided into good or bad. Both perspectives acknowledge that Jakarta has real problems like overcrowding and environmental pressure, and that development outside Java could create new opportunities. But both interviews also point towards the same issue. The benefits of consequences of IKN are not experienced equally.
The first response focuses more on the gap between development on paper and development in everyday life. Even if large infrastructure projects appear successful, that doesn't automatically mean ordinary people experience the same improvements in their daily lives. The speaker also emphasizes participation and inclusion, suggesting that development becomes problematic when the people most affected have little influence over the process.